As the year comes to an end, snow starts to hit the floor. So the other day I was walking around in the snow and it started to get a little dark. And then I noticed someone else walking around in the snow with me, and I thought, hey, someone else likes to walk in the snow just as much as I do. But before I could even get their name or how their day was going, I realized I really had to run home because, I still have the last couple horror movies to review from this past Halloween. Z came out in 2020. It is a psychological horror movie. The kind of horror that you're going to see is jump scares, a little bit of violence, but mostly just tension building moments. It's much more of an atmospheric kind of movie. Mostly what this movie is about is a troubled young boy with an imaginary friend. That is the main focus, is this imaginary friend of this young boy. Overall, I'd say this movie is pretty alright. The acting, for the most part, is pretty good, except from the young boy himself. He is a prominent main character in this story, but a lot of the focus is on the parents dealing with the young boy. I know childhood actors are kind of hit and miss, and this one, it's a miss. I would say that is the main reason why this movie isn't as good as it actually could have been, is because of the main boy actor. This kid does some pretty horrific things. You don't really see a lot of it, so a lot of times you're like, is he doing it, or is it the imaginary friend? And it doesn't really matter, because if a child witnessed his imaginary friend do these terrible things, or if he does them himself, it would manifest a lot more, clearly through the kid's actions and, what he says. But in this movie, it doesn't really do that. One of the things that I really liked about this movie, and these are minor spoilers, but I really need to express this, I love the imaginary friend because every single time you see him, he takes a completely different form. Not necessarily form, he's still like a humanoid kind of looking guy, but he looks different every single time you kind of see him. And that's your whole experience with this guy through the entire movie, is you kind of see him. There are very brief moments, but he is very, very prominent in this story. So I really liked it. It does have a little bit of faults, so I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. It's good enough to give it a watch at least once. Sputnik came out in 2020. It is a Russian horror movie. Remember
this. Never forget this!
Subbed, never dubbed. And the kind of horror that you're going to see in this movie is monsters, violence, and that's pretty much it. It's an alien movie. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that movie Alive. Or sorry, not Alive, Life. Geez, when you have one word movie titles, the names get so fucking similar. But it reminds me of that movie because it reminds you that aliens can be scary. Geez, that scene really still gets to me. Not just because, obviously he would be dead. The frickin' inner mouth went through that guy's head, so he shouldn't be screaming. But the screaming and the cat just kind of watching him, I don't know exactly what the I'm supposed to expect from this cat, but just him watching it happen and not do anything, really gets to me. Sometimes I really forget that. It seems like a lot of the horror movies, a lot of the stuff is terrestrial, like zombies, serial killers, monsters, things like that. A lot of it is really terrestrial. Maybe I'm just watching the wrong or a very specific kind of movies, but this movie definitely reminds you that, shit from outer space can really scare you. The acting's done really well, it's shot really well, the script is pretty well done. I will say that I was actually pleasantly surprised that the Russian government officials were actually kind of nice and pleasant. I don't know, maybe I'm just watching the wrong news channel, but it seems like the Russian government nowadays would not put up with any kind of bullshit from any person for whatever the reason. But in this movie, Yeah, they kind of put up with a lot, and you kind of question why, because it's all top secret. Everything in this movie is top secret. We have a fucking alien that everyone is keeping on the down low, and yeah, I feel like they would go to much more thorough measures to make sure that nothing happened, like unless all the boxes were checked. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the ending of Sputnik. Skip to day 28 if you don't want spoilers, because I am about to spoil the ending. Main reason why is because, I didn't like that shit. So the ending of Sputnik, I'm not going to explain the whole thing, but basically, it's a happy ending, and this movie should not have had a happy ending. Another problem I have with the movie is the monster. I mean, sometimes this thing seems fucking invincible, and it really shouldn't be. But it's such a cool monster. You want the monster to have a happy ending, but this is a movie that has a happy ending for the humans. And honestly, towards the end of the movie, I just didn't care that much about them, or maybe I just didn't care enough about them to want them to overcome the monster. I wanted the monster to overcome them. So because of that, I'm giving the movie a 6 out of 10. This is a movie that should have had a sad, kind of unknown or horrifying ending, and it just doesn't. So, 6 out of 10 for me. Color Out of Space came out in 2020. It is a cosmic horror movie. So most of the scares that you're going to see in this is a lot of body torture and a lot of transfiguration and just a whole lot of shit that you can't really explain. And it stars the legendary Nick Cage.
What do you say we cut the chit-chat? A-hole!
You know, sometimes when it comes to actors, I feel like we don't really quite appreciate what they bring to the table. Whether it's their off-the-cuff dialogue,
I never misspelled anything! Not once, not one time!
Or some of the things they just really bring to the table.
God!
How they're able to physically take on the role and really adapt the character to themselves.
What is it? What's wrong, sister?
Or vice versa.
And you have to do it. You have to, or I'll fire you. Do you understand?
There are very few treasures that we should never forget of this era. And Nick Cage just keeps on coming out with banger.
I'd like to take his face off.
After banger.
Am I getting through to you? Over!
After banger.
How, in the name of Zeus's butthole, did you get out of your cell?
Starring in legendary comic book movies. Super dramas. National Treasure.
Because obviously you have a tendency to overreact!
And
What are these fucking iguanas doing on my coffee table?
They ain't no iguana.
Yeah, there are.
We Do Not Deserve Nick Cage.
So do me a favor and get the fuck out of my sight, okay? No, actually, I'll save you the trouble and get the fuck out of yours!
Oh yeah. Okay, Color Out of Space is a 6 out of 10. It's a fun movie to watch just because of Nick Cage. But other than that, there's really not much of a plot to this movie. I mean, visually it looks nice. The acting is sometimes done pretty well. But again, there's really not a whole lot of story. There's really not much character arcs. It's just Nick Cage losing his shit and a couple other people losing their shit around him. So, if you want to watch that, I mean, by all means, have at it. Color Out of Space. I recommend it to all Nick Cage fans. And one more for the road. Thirst came out in 2009. It is a South Korean horror movie, basically about vampires. The kind of horror that you're going to see in this movie is, violence, blood, and I think that's pretty much it. Just violence and blood. And I have a little bit of beef with this movie, mostly because of the trailer that you can actually see right now, because the trailer is very much misleading you into what kind of a movie this is. The trailer is very fast-paced. There's a lot of cuts. It makes you think that this is a very tense movie. It's really not. It's a very slow movie. And there's nothing wrong with it. I really do enjoy this movie. However, it's a low-key vampire movie. So, yeah, there are vampires in it, but they're not doing a whole lot of super crazy shit. I mean, and when they do end up doing some, superhuman shit for whatever reason, it's very minimal. Like, it happens just for a few seconds, and then the scene's over, and that's pretty much it. For the first 2/3 of this movie, it's more focused on being a love drama kind of story, and then the second focus is being a vampire story. Unlike other vampire dramas where our main character vampire has a hard time controlling his lusts and his urges, it's actually interesting to watch. And then the last third of the movie is focused more on being a vampire story, and then the love part takes kind of a back seat to it. It's still there, but it's primarily more of a vampire kind of finish. The acting is good, the set pieces are good, the mythology of the vampires is good, the violence is very good. For this movie, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. It's good. I recommend it to people who don't mind slower movies that have to do with, a monster here or there. His House came out in 2020. It is a Netflix supernatural horror movie. The kind of scares that you're going to see in this movie are a lot of ghosts, a lot of jump scares, and a lot of tension building moments where it's a little bit of like slow-paced horror trying to build a good kind of atmosphere that is really just trying to basically give you a sense of helplessness for some of the main characters. This was actually one of my favorite movies of this year. I really do recommend this movie to anyone who likes a good story. I mean, the acting is all done really well. The dialogue is done really well. The scares are really well done. I really like the backstory behind this family because it really... it's complex, and that's what I really like from my characters. Obviously there are some horror movies that are just, you get what you get with slasher movies, so it's not really trying to wow you. But then again, there are some really great horror movies that really try to build characters that are just completely imperfect, and you see their faults and their flaws, and a lot of times you also see them really try to make the best of their current situation. And that is exactly what you get from this movie. I would give this movie a 9, maybe even a 9.5 out of 10. There's really not a whole lot I would diss on this movie. I mean, the wife in the movie, sometimes she can get a little annoying just complaining about the new life that they have.
All I can taste is the metal.
We'll get used to it.
What? Did you have flakes of your fork come off of your fork as you were eating? Or did you actually cook food that tastes like metal? I mean, anyone who actually has any kind of experience eating with silverware, I mean, the metal taste is pretty minimal. And if that's the only thing you can taste, you're a shitty cook. Add some fucking salt and pepper, come on. Here it is. The last movie of the marathon. And what a banger to go out on. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 1978 version. This is one of those hidden gems. Well, not necessarily hidden. It's just so damn old that anyone born in the 90s just, they don't really give a shit to actually watch it. But they actually should. This is a very good movie. It's very well made. The kind of horror that you're going to see in this movie, for the most part, is just thriller horror. I mean, it's very suspenseful, it's very investigative, you don't really know who has been taken over, why. You don't even really know the goal of this main monster. And that's the terrifying thing about it, is it doesn't really have a goal other than to assimilate the entire population. I mean, you do know that it came from an essentially a dead planet. So maybe that is the catch, and that is why they are the true villains. Because all they do is assimilate until their bodies die and the world dies, and then they just move along to the next planet. Even though this movie is very old, I still gotta recommend it to people who love horror because it's one of the classics. And even though some of the scares have been spoiled because it is such an iconic movie, there was actually one moment where I was literally just filled with dread. And spoilers, it is the moment where the main character is actually holding the woman that he loves, and it's after she gets assimilated. And up until this point, you don't really know what happens to the bodies after they're assimilated. And her body just crumbles into nothing just by the light squeeze of his arms. And then her assimilated body comes out of the bushes, tits and all. And you think a guy playing the friend zone for years would be more like,
it's about damn time.
But he's in the middle of an alien invasion, so he doesn't really have enough time to really enjoy the moment. I mean, the thing that I can kind of go against on this movie is Jeff Goldblum's character in this movie. I mean, he's just Jeff Goldblum. He doesn't really add too much to it. It's just him being him. Also, our main character, Donald Sutherland, who is a legend in the acting business, his character is kind of a piece of shit. I mean, he's really good at his job, but he's incredibly flirty and incredibly personal with a woman who I'm pretty sure is married throughout this whole thing. So it's kind of that friend of your wife or your girlfriend that you don't fucking trust, and it's for a very good reason. You should not trust this guy. So overall, I would give this movie an 8.5 out of 10. Not really a 9 because it is a little old, and not all the characters are super likable, but a movie as a whole, this is really well done. And that's it. That's all of them. Thank you all very much for tuning in to this very long marathon. I mean, I'm sorry that I couldn't get all of this out during the Halloween season, but hopefully enough of you stick around to actually listen and watch, and hopefully I've reviewed some movies that you want to add to your list of things to watch next.